The silence of a widower's house is a heavy thing, dense enough to choke you, pressing against your eardrums until you start to hear the blood rushing through your own veins. My name is Thomas Wright, 79 years old, and for the last 2 years, my only connection to the living, breathing world has been a 10-inch digital photo frame sitting on my oak mantelpiece. It was a gift from my daughter, Claire, and her husband, Greg, given to me on my 77th birthday, with a smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. "It's a skylight frame, Dad," Claire had told me, her voice pitched high and bright, the way one speaks to a child or a simpleton. "We can upload photos of the grandkids instantly from our phones. You don't have to do a thing. It just plays." And for months, it did play. It cycled through pictures of birthday parties I wasn't invited to, vacations to Cabo and Aspen I didn't know they took, and school plays where my seat was conspicuously empty. I sat in my worn leather armchair, my joints aching with the damp cold of the guest cottage, staring at the screen, grateful for the crumbs of inclusion. I was the silent observer, the ghost in the machine, watching a family that had slowly, methodically edged me out of the frame of their actual lives. I live in the guest cottage now, a glorified shed at the back of the property I bought 40 years ago. Claire and Greg live in the main house. They moved in to take care of me after my wife, Martha, passed. But 3 months ago, they told me they needed to renovate the main dining room and the master suite. They said the dust would be bad for my lungs. They moved me out here, into the drafty stillness, and I haven't been back inside my own home since. But technology is a double-edged sword, especially in the arrogant. It started on a Tuesday, a rainy afternoon that made my arthritis flare so badly I could barely hold my coffee mug. The rain was drumming against the tin roof of the cottage, a relentless, lonely rhythm. I was watching the frame, mesmerized by the glowing pixels, waiting for a new picture of my grandson Leo. He was 7 now, and I missed the sound of his laugh more than I missed the ability to run. The screen flickered. Usually, the transition is a smooth fade, one smiling face dissolving into another, but this was a hard cut. Instead of a photo, a video started playing. It wasn't a stable, posed shot.
It was shaky, filmed from a phone that had likely been set down on a table, camera side up, without the recording being stopped. I leaned forward, squinting, my heart skipping a beat. I expected to see Leo playing with Legos. I expected to see a family dinner. Instead, I heard Greg's voice. It was clear, stripped of the fake warmth he used when he wanted to borrow my truck. "He's clueless, Claire," Greg said. I could hear the clink of silverware on china. They were eating lunch in the house I wasn't allowed to enter. "The old bat thinks we're fixing the foundation. I already have the appraisal for the commercial zoning." My breath caught in my throat. Commercial zoning? Tear down the structure? This house was built with money I earned sweating in a refinery for 30 years. Then I heard Claire's voice. It was sharp, cold, and pragmatic, a tone I had never heard her use. "Just make sure he signs the power of attorney update on Friday," she said. "Tell him it's for the insurance adjustment. Once we have that, we can liquidate the stock portfolio before the nursing home assessment kicks in." "He won't read it," Greg scoffed. "His eyes are shot." "I know," she replied. "He's desperate to be useful." The video ended abruptly. The phone presumably picked up, or the battery dying. The screen looped back to a picture of Leo smiling at a zoo, holding a cone of ice cream. I sat frozen, the blood draining from my face, leaving me cold and trembling. They weren't renovating. They were flipping my home. They weren't caring for me. They were liquidating me. They were discussing the dismantling of my life over lunch, dissecting my legacy like vultures picking at a carcass before the heart had even stopped beating. The emotional fallout was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me gasping for air. I felt nausea rise in my throat, a sour mix of coffee and bile. My daughter, my Claire, the girl I had carried on my shoulders at the county fair, the woman whose student loans I had paid off by working double shifts, destroying my back and my hearing so she could have a clean start. She was plotting to strip me bare. She looked at me and saw nothing but an expiring asset to be harvested. If you've ever poured your life into a child, sacrificing your dreams so they could chase theirs, only to realize in the winter of your life that they are waiting for you to die so they can cash the check, hit that subscribe button, because I wish someone had warned me.
I wish someone had told me that the greatest danger to an old man isn't a fall in the shower, it's the greed of the people he raised. I didn't smash the frame. The urge was there, a violent, red-hot impulse to throw the device against the wall and shatter the lies. But I didn't. I didn't call them screaming. I sat there, the betrayal hardening in my gut like concrete setting in the sun. I realized then that the cloud they talked about so reverently wasn't just storing memories, it was storing evidence. They had synced their phone galleries to the frame, and in their carelessness, their arrogance, they had uploaded the auto backup of their crimes. They thought I was too stupid to understand the technology. They thought the old bat would just stare at the pretty colors. Suspicion turned into obsession. I needed to know what else was on there. I tried to tap the screen, but my tremors were getting worse, fueled by the adrenaline coursing through my system. I couldn't navigate the menus. I needed help. I needed someone who wasn't family, someone who understood how to fight dirty. I called Elias. Elias was my old union rep, a man who had pivoted to running a small computer repair shop in his garage after the plant closed down. He was rough around the edges, a man who smelled of solder and stale tobacco, but he was loyal. He was the kind of man who would bury a body for you if the cause was just. "My toaster is broken, Elias," I told him over the phone, keeping my voice steady. "Can you come take a look? Bring your laptop. It's a..." Elias arrived an hour later, stepping into the guest cottage with his toolbox. He took one look at my face, pale, sweating, eyes wild, and locked the door behind him. "You look like hell, Tom," he grunted. "It's not the toaster," I whispered, pointing to the frame on the mantel. "It's that. It showed me something, Elias." Elias didn't ask questions. He hooked the frame up to his rugged laptop with a USB cable. He typed furiously, his brow furrowed. "It's an auto-sync error, Tom," Elias whispered after a few minutes, his voice low with disbelief. "They didn't filter the uploads. Everything they record on their phones, every photo, every video is dumping into the cloud cache, and this frame is pulling it down." He pulled up a file dated 3 weeks ago. He turned the laptop screen toward me. It was another video. This time, the camera was steady, propped up on a desk. My desk.
The antique mahogany roll top that was currently locked inside the main house. The video showed Greg sitting in my chair. He had a legal pad in front of him. He was holding one of my old fountain pens. He was signing his name, then crossing it out, then signing again. "Thomas Wright," he muttered on the video. "Thomas H." He held the pad up to the camera, comparing it to a document I recognized, my original deed. He laughed, a sound that chilled my marrow. "It's shaky," Greg said to someone off camera, Claire. "But that makes it look more authentic, right?" "Just make sure it matches the driver's license signature," Claire's voice replied. My hand gripped the armrest of my chair until the leather creaked and popped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a felony. It was forgery. It was fraud. They were practicing my signature to sign documents I had never seen. I asked Elias, my voice low and dangerous, a rumble that came from the chest. "I can download the whole cache," Elias said, his fingers flying across the keys. "I'm mirroring the drive right now. But Tom, you need a lawyer. You need the police." "No," I said, staring at the digital face of my son-in-law, his smug grin pixelated on the screen. "The police will just arrest them. They'll get a lawyer. They'll plea bargain. That's too quick. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to erase me while I was still here." I looked up at Elias. The flashback hit me then, visceral and sharp. The day my wife, Martha, died in the hospice bed in our living room, the room they were now gutting. I remembered Claire holding my hand, her tears wetting my sleeve. She had looked me in the eye. "We're a team, Dad," she had said. "I promise. I'll always look after you." That memory curdled into poison in my veins. I realized I had been the underdog in my own home for years, grateful for scraps of attention while they feasted on the main course of my assets. I had let them make me small. "Tom," Elias said, interrupting my thoughts. His face had gone gray. I asked, "Is it?" "Just watch," Elias said. He clicked play. The video was recent, dated yesterday. It showed Claire and Greg in my kitchen. The granite countertops were covered in blueprints, but in the center of the island stood a bottle of champagne. Not just any champagne. It was my bottle, the vintage 1980 Dom Perignon I had bought the year Claire was born. I had kept it in the cellar for 40 years.
I was saving it for Leo's wedding day. It was supposed to be a legacy. Greg popped the cork.
The foam spilled over onto the blueprints. They laughed. "To the lake house," Greg cheered, raising a crystal flute. "And to the accident that's going to pay for it," Claire added, clinking her glass against his. I stopped breathing. Elias froze. "The stairs in the cottage are steep," Greg said, taking a sip of my wine. "And he's so clumsy lately. One fall, a broken hip, pneumonia sets in. Nature takes its course." "It's efficient," Claire agreed. "We just need the insurance policy to clear the contestability period." They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were discussing how easy it would be to help me along. They were drinking my grandson's legacy while plotting my murder. The fear that had gripped me for the last hour vanished. It evaporated completely, replaced by a cold, tactical rage that settled over me like a suit of armor. I wasn't shaking anymore. My arthritis didn't hurt. I looked at the digital frame on the mantel. It was cycling through photos again. Leo at the park, a sunset, a plate of sushi. It looked so innocent. I asked Elias. "Every bite," Elias said, pulling the flash drive out. "Tom, we have to go to the cops now." 2 weeks, I said, staring at the screen. "To plan the renovation," I said. "They want to tear down my life? Fine." I looked at the frame. It was no longer a gift. It was a weapon. It was a loaded gun sitting on my mantelpiece, and they had handed it to me with a smile. I was going to aim it right at their hearts, and I wasn't going to miss. "Leave the frame connected, Elias," I commanded. "If they upload anything else, I want to see it." I sat back in my chair, the silence of the cottage no longer oppressive. It was the silence of a hunter waiting in a blind. The rain tapped against the roof, but now it sounded like applause. The stage for a man's resurrection is rarely a church. Sometimes it is a rented ballroom smelling of industrial cleaner and expensive perfume, filled with the very people who smiled while he was being erased. The annual Founders' Dinner was the heartbeat of our small-town social calendar, a pretentious black tie event where the elite gathered to pat themselves on the back for being wealthy enough to be charitable. Tonight, my family, the so-called pillars of the community, were the guests of honor.
Greg was receiving the Humanitarian of the Year award for his work with the local housing charity. A bitter irony that tasted like copper in my mouth, considering he was actively evicting his own father-in-law to flip a property for commercial zoning. I wasn't supposed to be there. They wanted me in the guest cottage, staring at the digital frame, waiting for the accident they had toasted to. But I arrived in a yellow taxi that rattled as it idled at the curb. I was wearing my old tuxedo, the one I hadn't worn since Martha's funeral. It smelled of cedar blocks and history, a scent that grounded me. It was a little loose around the shoulders now. Stress had eaten away at my muscle mass, but the silk lapels were still sharp. Elias was with me, dressed in black cargo pants and a polo shirt with a generic AV Tech logo we had printed that morning. He carried a laptop bag that contained not only the cables we needed, but the ammunition that would level the building, metaphorically speaking. "So?" Elias asked, pausing at the service entrance. "Once we plug in, there's no going back." "Let it burn," I said, gripping the handle of my cane. "The rot is deep, Elias." We walked into the ballroom. The lights were dimmed, casting a golden hue over the round tables draped in white linen. The air buzzed with the low hum of polite conversation and the clinking of crystal. I walked down the side aisle, leaning heavily on my cane, exaggerating the limp. I needed them to see a victim. I needed them to see the frail, confused old man they had described to the probate court. The room went quiet as I passed the first few tables. People recognized me. They whispered behind their hands. "Isn't that Thomas? I thought he was bedridden." I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the head table, where my daughter and son-in-law sat like royalty. Claire saw me first. Her smile, which had been plastered on for the photographers, faltered instantly. A crack appeared in her porcelain mask, a flicker of genuine panic. She whispered something to Greg, who spun around, his face going pale. Claire stood up and rushed toward me, her silk gown swishing aggressively. She intercepted me before I could reach the center of the room. "Thomas," she hissed, grabbing my elbow with a grip that was painful. "What are you doing here? You're confusing everyone. We told you to stay at the cottage." I looked at her, my daughter. She looked beautiful tonight, wearing a diamond necklace I knew for a fact was bought with the dividends from my stolen stocks. "I just wanted to see Greg get his award, sweetie," I said, my voice trembling with a feigned frailty that I had perfected over the last 48 hours. "I wanted to be part of the family moment.
I took a taxi. She looked around, seeing the eyes of the town council members on us. She couldn't drag me out. Not here, not now. She relaxed slightly, seeing only the weak, senile old man she thought she owned. Fine, she snapped, her voice dropping to a whisper, but you sit in the back, way in the back, and don't make a scene. Do not speak to anyone. I promise, I said, patting her hand. She steered me to an empty
anymore. I was Thomas Wright. I was alive, and I had just developed the most important picture of my life.